Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Power Core Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, Jerron Harrington, back to hit you another video, and today we have finally reached the end of the first half of this series. What if Naruto was trained by Dr. Strange? Naruto Mystic Adventures, Part 8. Now that we have finally come to the first half of this series, as always, I want to say thank you to everyone who supports Power Core Productions and Podcastings. As always, I cannot do it without you. You make the channel grow, you make the core grow. We've been on a lot during this journey, as Naruto has now been exposed to the elements of the MCU and that of the multiverse as a whole. With Dr. Strange having taken Naruto under his wing, he has gained a lot more in terms of power and his overall knowledge of the various forces that are around him. But now we have reached the end of the first half of this story. How will things shape up for Naruto as we go into the time skip and enter into the story of Shippuden? What greater forces are at work in the universe, and how will they play a role? And just where will this lead Naruto as we continue our stories into the Marvel multiverse itself, as we see various superheroes meet various worlds of anime, going all abroad, breaking off into different branches, and just who is the villain, who is at the centerpiece of it all, who has been manipulating things behind the scenes, and just what will his intentions be when our heroes come together in the near future. For all this and more, find out as we go into today's video. What if Naruto was trained by Dr. Strange? Naruto Mystic Adventures, Part 8. As always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Once Naruto, along with Haku and Jiraiya, returned back to the Hidden Leaf with Lady Tsunade, she would go on to help and heal Kakashi and Zabuza from their fights with Itachi and Kisame, as well as taking her role as the new 5th Hokage. Naruto, in the meanwhile, would continue his training, as well as hanging out with Haku from time to time. Frankly, they didn't get a chance to see each other as often. With Haku now becoming a Chunin and everything, she was really being put through the ringers for the Hidden Leaf Village, especially with the attack from the Sand and the Sound Village, and with the death of the 3rd Hokage. Everyone was still revving up and getting ready to go. Naruto had even talked about this with Iruka-sensei not too long ago, explained that the village was at a critical point right now and all hands were on deck. Even he, if he wasn't doing academy work, was going to have to start taking missions again. It really showed how everyone needed to step up in this moment and truly give everything they had. And Naruto felt the same, inclining him to want to train and get stronger. However, there was a problem starting to brew. His teammate, Sasuke Uchiha, he had been dealing with his own inner demons at the time. He had already lost in the Chunin exams to Rock Lee. That was bad enough. Then his brother came along and made him look like an absolute joke. And what was even worse was that he was denied his vengeance, his chance to go after him once again. Sasuke wondered just how long he was going to stay the way he was. It seemed as though Naruto and Sakura were now starting to get ahead of him in every way. The more time passed, the more it seemed as though he was being left behind. At this rate, he was never going to catch up to his brother. He was never going to be able to get revenge and bring back the prestige of the Uchiha clan. Everything he had been working for his whole life, all of it hanged in the balance at this moment. And it came to a boiling point. To a point where one day, while he was walking, he just felt he were in a bad mood. He didn't really care about anyone or anything around him, but he had to know. He had to see who was really the best. Was he really giving it his all, or was he being held back? As he walked, he would eventually find where Naruto was, out in one of the training fields with Haku. The two of them were working together and enjoying each other's company when Sasuke approached. He ignored Haku's greetings and went straight towards Naruto, asking him for a fight. Of course, Naruto was down to fight Sasuke any day, but at that moment, he was really trying to hone in on his spells, trying to get his magical skill under control, but Sasuke didn't care. Naruto would be a bit hesitant though. He could sense the malice inside of Sasuke. This wasn't any ordinary time when they had fought or sparred in the past, no. This was very different. Sasuke was almost bloodlusted in a sense. Naruto would hesitantly agree, and he asked Sasuke to put his headband on before they fought. But in his own act of defiance, he said he wouldn't. This actually irritated Naruto. Putting on your headband was the sign of respect, that the two stood as equals. But Sasuke merely grinned. He remarked that Naruto wasn't his equal, and he wasn't going to do something so demeaning. All the same, Naruto didn't even care anymore, and the two of them just went at it. At first it was a flurry of taijutsu, which surprisingly was in Naruto's favor. You see, Naruto learned more than just the mystic arts from Dr. Strange and Wong. He also learned various forms of hand-to-hand combat, including Judo, Wing Chun, and Tai Chi. Putting those talents into good use, he was able to hold his own against Sasuke. Even when Sasuke started to use the Sharingan, Naruto was still able to hold his own. Once they created some distance, Naruto would use the images of Icon to create multiple copies of himself. Sasuke's Sharingan would read them much differently than chakra. The color was all too off. Instead of the color of the clones being that of a blue to signify that they were using chakra, they were like a bright shining orange, as if it were a different type of energy altogether. For Sasuke, it was a bit hard to read, but he could understand it some. To the Sharingan, it was kind of like it was translating what Naruto's power truly was, but there would be some lag in between. All the same, Sasuke was still able to hold his own against some of the clones, creating space as he would launch a fireball jutsu towards Naruto, wiping out many of the clones in the process. However, Naruto would use the vapors of Voltor to create a fog, obscuring their vision as Naruto went racing through, going after Sasuke once again. But using the Sharingan, he was just vaguely able to see through the veil of fog and smoke around him, only being able to block some of Naruto's attacks. Drawing more and more upon the power of the curse mark, he became more angered and irritated as the fight progressed. He came here thinking he was the superior, but all the same, it seemed as though he were going nowhere. Haku watched on from a distance worried. Worried for Naruto, obviously, but for Sasuke as well. She had never seen him like this. He was usually more cool and level-headed than this, but now it seemed as though he was just throwing himself at Naruto, desperately trying to cut him down. Once the smoke and the fog evaded, the only thing that would be left would be Naruto and Sasuke. Sasuke hovering in the air as he was crashing down, Chidori in hand, and Naruto creating the Rasengan. The two of them looked like they were getting ready to crash with one another, and Haku could see if she didn't do something fast, then it was going to be in serious trouble. She was preparing to create 2 crystal ice mirrors to try to stop them. However, at the last moment, 2 large figures would step forward. It would be Zabuza and Kakashi. Zabuza would redirect Naruto and Kakashi would redirect Sasuke, the 2 of them flying in opposite directions and crashing into 2 respective trees. For Sasuke, his Chidori managed to pierce through half of the tree's whole trunk, and he managed to pull out his arm. As the smoke and the dust settled, he looked over to where Naruto had landed, and for a split second he was worried. He went to go check and see if Naruto was alright until he saw it. Naruto's Rasengan didn't just hit the tree, it obliterated it. It pulled it from the roots of the very ground it was stationed in. Not just one tree, but a few more trees behind it, all of whom had been blasted away. Comparing that destructive power to the power of what his Chidori could do, it was clear as day to see which one was the superior. And Sasuke, he just left. Zabuza would give Naruto an earful, and he would also warn Haku from doing something that dangerous, noting that even with the crystal ice mirror technique, she could have potentially got herself hurt in the process. Naruto would apologize. He didn't mean for the fight to break out the way that it did, and Haku would even vouch for him, stating that it was Sasuke who antagonized and started from the beginning. Kakashi figured he would go and have a word with Sasuke, leaving them to their own devices. Sasuke would be alone in the forest, sitting on a tree when ninja wire stopped him. He looked up to see Kakashi was there. He really wasn't in the mood, but Kakashi would still try to give him a heart-to-heart. He could tell what Sasuke was going through. He was still hung up on revenge, and he had learned of what had happened with the encounter with Itachi. Sasuke couldn't let it go. He could never let this go. It wasn't that easy for him. But Kakashi would explain that revenge wasn't the only way, and that even though they had both been through losses in their life, they had people to fill in those gaps. However, Sasuke would remark that Kakashi could never understand. He didn't truly know what he was going through. He wouldn't understand unless he saw someone he loved be killed. How about that? How about he go kill someone that was precious to Kakashi? Kakashi would merely give him an eye smile, as he would exclaim that all the people who he truly cared for, everyone that mattered to him, they were already dead, and he watched them die, up close and personal. This gave Sasuke a moment of pause. He could tell that Kakashi wasn't faking or just giving him a talk, but that he meant that. But at the same time, things couldn't be that simple. At least not for him. It never could be. All the same, Kakashi would tell Sasuke that now the choice was his. He was at a critical juncture in his life. The actions that he took now could shape the very man that he would grow up to become. And with that, Kakashi would leave Sasuke to his own. Sasuke would stay there in the forest for a while, meditating, thinking about everything that happened. All the moments in his life that brought him to this point. As he did so, he would be confronted by the Sound Four, the henchmen for Orochimaru. Sasuke was in no mood and tried to fight them off, but he was defeated rather easily. The Sound Four remarking that he wasn't the only one who was deemed special by Orochimaru, the 4 of them also revealing their curse marks. They would lure Sasuke in with the promise of power, telling him that if he truly wanted to gain the strength needed to enact his revenge, that power lay with Orochimaru. But he had to be strong enough to make that decision. After they had left him there, Sasuke would wander the village once more. He walked through and saw all the old familiar sights, walking through the Uchiha compound, before eventually he had made his decision. He would go and pack his bag before leaving his room, looking at a photo of himself with Team 7 once more. Truthfully, he had no grudge against them, and he was actually quite proud to see how far his teammates had come, especially Sakura. The girl once thought to be annoying and useless was now making something of her life. If she could do something like that, then maybe he needed to as well. And with that, Sasuke would prepare to leave the village. He had made it to the outskirts of the village itself, walking through the gates. However, as he was entering out into the forested area, he would come across Sakura, who was on patrol. Sakura would ask Sasuke what he was doing, why he was leaving this time of night when he didn't have a mission. Sasuke tried to play it off, but eventually the truth would come out. He told her quite frankly they had gone as far as they could go together, and that now it was time for him to do what he needed to do on his own. Sakura understood what he meant by this. He was going to go to Orochimaru. In that moment, Sakura felt a swirl of emotions. Love, anger, hate, sadness. It hadn't been lost on anyone how she had felt for Sasuke for a long time, but now it felt as though it were reaching a boiling point. Sasuke was expecting her to throw herself at him, to confess her undying love, but she didn't do that. Sakura, through her training with Kurenai Sensei and Agatha Sensei, she had learned more than just that of the mystic arts and controlling the chaos that was within her. She had learned to look at things from a different perspective. They addressed her feelings for Sasuke, and as good and as well-intentioned as they might have been, perhaps they were misplaced. The more Sakura thought about it, the more she even had to acknowledge within herself, did she really love Sasuke the way she thought she did? Outside of his good looks and his talents as a shinobi, what more was there really? Agatha Sensei gave her some good advice. To open herself to new surroundings, to new possibilities. Not that the idea of her and Sasuke couldn't exist, but that wasn't the only option. Like her talent and potential, there had to be a way to take off the limits. As great as Sasuke might be in Sakura's mind, he might be the ultimate limiter, what was holding her back from achieving her true potential. The more Sakura thought about this in that moment, the more she realized that right now, she needed to stop Sasuke. And the only way that she could do so was if she gave it her all. Meaning she couldn't afford to hold back or be sentimental. As Sakura would approach Sasuke expecting a hug would be surprised when Sakura would go in for an attack. Sasuke would back away in that moment asking what she was doing, and Sakura merely affirmed that she wasn't going to let him leave. Sasuke would attempt to run and Sakura would chase after him deep into the forest itself as they got further and further from the village, until eventually they found themselves in an opening in a clearing. Sakura, using her magical energy, she would use the chaos magic to lift a few of the fallen tree branches around them, hurling them towards Sasuke to try to get him to stop, before eventually catching him in midair and holding him in place. It took a lot of mental focus to keep him there, and for Sasuke, he had to draw on the power of the curse mark just to break free. However, Sakura wasn't done. She would start to apply genjutsu on top of genjutsu, and Sasuke had to keep track breaking himself out over and over again. He even got caught in one genjutsu that forced him to face inner Sakura. You could say this was a domain of sorts where Sakura was the superior one. As he was towered by the large, darkened Sakura, she would bring her fist down upon him. Sasuke dispelling the genjutsu at the last moment, only to be met with a rocket punch to the face by the real Sakura. Sasuke, however, even though he didn't want to do too much harm, he knew that he couldn't afford to waste too much time. However, before he could continue on in the fight though, Sakura would be surrounded by the Sound Four, who were not going to allow anyone to harm Orochimaru's vessel. However, before they could do any real lasting damage, Sasuke would tell them that he was only going to leave if they spared her life. And they did so. Sakura didn't go down without a fight though. Her power was more than what any of them were expecting. They all had to go level 1 and join together at once just to bring her down. She really did have some frightening power. They were surprised that someone like her wasn't sought after by Orochimaru. With that type of power in his possession, that was pretty scary. Once they incapacitated her, Sasuke would take her body and leave it at the gates of the village, before leaving with the Sound Four into the night. Eventually the next day, Sakura would be found by 2 guards. She would be rushed to the hospital, and she would give word to Lady Tsunade of what had happened. Once Tsunade had gotten word of Sasuke leaving, she knew momentarily that she needed to get a team together to go after him. Thankfully, there were some new chunin that she could assign to the mission. One in particular, Shikamaru Nara. However, before Shikamaru could leave to form the team to go after Sasuke, she did have one person that she wanted him to take on the mission. That being Naruto. After picking him up and informing him of what had happened, that Sakura was in the hospital and that Sasuke had left, possibly being taken away with henchmen led by Orochimaru, Naruto was up and ready to go immediately. They went throughout the village looking to find any genin that they could ask to come along with them for the mission. They found Kiba, Choji, Neji, Lee, and even Hinata, who wanted to go and support Naruto. There was one last person that Naruto wanted to ask. As he went looking for her, he would see that Haku was actually getting ready to leave, Zabuza about to see her off, when he approached her. He told her about the situation at hand, and Haku wanted to go. She really did, but she had a mission. Of course, Zabuza could see that Haku really did want to go with Naruto, and Zabuza had the day off. However, he warned that it was going to be coming out of her check. He took the scroll and said that he could knock this mission out no problem, and he told Haku to go with Naruto immediately. Haku would thank Zabuza as Zabuza left to take her mission for her. Joining the others, Shikamaru had a team a lot bigger than what he was expecting, which was probably for the best, seeing the enemies that they were going to have to go up against. Once they got into formation, Shikamaru would lead the squad, and they would make their way through. Not before long, they would eventually catch up with the Sound Four, who were resting. They had to stop midway, not just after dealing with a fight with some Jonin from the Hidden Leaf, to recover, but there was also the fact of the ritual, a process that one must undergo when being given the curse mark. It would put that person in a temporary suspended animation, almost like a state of death, and Sasuke was in that state at this moment, stuck inside of a small coffin. While they were watching over him, Kidomaru, with his 6 arms, had used a special jutsu to set off any sort of traps. They were like spider webs on the ground, and once he sensed the group coming, he was easily able to capture and expose them. This led on to a full-scale fight, with the others of the Sound Four attempting to leave while Jirobo would stay behind, trapping everyone inside of an earth barrier jutsu, a dome that would keep everyone inside while he siphoned off their chakra. Naruto knew they didn't have time for this, and using his sling ring, he would open a portal that would allow them to go to the outside immediately. Jirobo was stunned with how quickly they had gotten out, and he was preparing to fight and hold them back as long as possible. However, Choji and Lee would take the forefront here, the two of them deciding that they would hold Jirobo off, while everyone else would progress forward. While Shikamaru didn't necessarily like this plan, he knew that this was the best chance they had to get Sasuke back. With the numbers on their side, he knew that in all likelihood they would have to branch off into individual or multi-man fights. If they did so, with them having the numbers game, they would eventually have more than enough to get Sasuke and take him back to the village. And this played out almost exactly as Shikamaru feared. Neji would be held off to fight Kidomaru alone. Kiba and Akamaru would find themselves facing Sakan and Ukon in the process. And even Shikamaru, once he felt as though the numbers were on his side, 4-1, with himself, Naruto, Haku, and Hinata, he planned to hold off Tayuya, while the other three, Naruto and with Haku and Hinata as escorts, would take Sasuke back to the village. However, things didn't fully go according to plan once they got to that point. Mainly because, at that moment, a fifth member introduced himself. A man fighting with a sword made of bone. His name was Kimimaru, and he effortlessly took the coffin containing Sasuke, before pursuing to the direction to where Lord Orochimaru was, with Naruto, Hinata, and Haku chasing after him, under Shikamaru's order, as he just got a feeling that Naruto was going to need all the help he could get. They would eventually find themselves in the open field, and Naruto readying himself for battle along with Haku and Hinata. The three would go and try to take on Kimimaru alone, and he would actually give him a good fight. Naruto's abilities alone giving Kidomaru plenty of fits, forcing the bone user to have to extend many of his techniques just to be able to fight and hold them off, even going as far as to enter into the stage 1 of his own curse mark. As Naruto would clash with a mystical constructed sword, along with Kidomaru's own bone sword, and Haku using the crystal ice mirrors at various points on the battlefield, attacking from a distance. Using her Senbon, she would aim them directly at the small slivers. They would be these little joints in between where the bones were, where there was exposed marrow. They were small and tiny openings to say the least, but they were just the tiniest of areas where bone couldn't be made the hardest, and she would focus her attacks there. They would slow him down, just enough for Naruto to land any strikes where he could. Hinata, using her Byakugan, would try to find any weak spots within his bone-like armor whenever possible for Haku, and the three of them would work together to try to fend and hold him off, until eventually Sasuke would awaken. He could feel the power coursing through him. He was more stronger than he had ever been before in his life. Naruto would call out to Sasuke, telling him that it was time for them to go home. But Sasuke merely looked back to Naruto and smiled, as he continued to run away. Naruto knew he had to chase after him, but Kidomaru wouldn't allow it. However, before Naruto could be stopped, Hinata and Haku would hold off Kimimaru, telling Naruto to go after him. Naruto would thank his friends as he did so. And in that moment, Haku could see something. She didn't say it aloud, but she understood well enough. She wasn't the only one in love with Naruto. As Naruto chased after Sasuke, the two girls would continue their fight against Kimimaro. However, without Naruto now, the fight became a lot more desperate. Hinata had to take much more of a hands-on approach, and using her own gentle fist taijutsu, as well as being aided by the Byakugan, she was able to hold her own against the Bone User. However, there would be a critical point in the fight. Haku would be pinned down in a moment, and it looked as though Kitamura was going in to deliver a fatal strike. However, before she could be hit, Hinata would arrive just in time to take the fatal blow. She would be slashed across the chest and would begin to bleed out. Haku would move Hinata out of the way, trying her best to treat the wound as best she could, although Hinata could feel that this might be the end for her. Although thankfully, before things got any too out of hand, there would be a blast of sand directed straight towards Kimimaro. It was Gaara of the desert. He arrived in time, and he would take on the fight, allowing for the two girls a chance to recover as best they could. All the while, Naruto would continue making his way, until eventually he arrives with Sasuke at the Valley of the End, a famed site in the Land of Fire, where two of the Hidden Leaf's strongest shinobi did battle, that very battle creating the valley that they stood in. Standing amongst the two statues, Naruto on the head of the first Hokage himself, Hashirama Senju, and Sasuke that of his ancestor, and the man that rivaled the Senju leader, Madara Uchiha. Naruto would ask Sasuke why he was so dead set on following Orochimaru, when he knew what the outcome would be. But for Sasuke, there wasn't any other choice for him. Even if it meant that he would become nothing more but a pawn for Orochimaru, if he could gain the power to defeat his brother, then that truly didn't matter to him anymore. Sasuke's eyes had completely changed. The more he drew upon the power of the curse mark, the stronger he became. To the point where even as Naruto engaged him in combat, Sasuke was able to hold his own much better than he did originally. This got to the point where even Naruto had to start drawing on the power of the Nine Tails just to withstand Sasuke's strength. And the situation only got worse when Sasuke unlocked the 3 Tomoe Sharingan. But there was an added twist though. At first, the Sharingan was red. It was red whenever he was reading Naruto's chakra, and that was true. But then the Sharingan started to shift in color. His Sharingan changed from that of a bright red to that of a shimmering blue. It was as blue as the ocean itself. Naruto could see that Sasuke's eyes had now turned blue, but he had no way of knowing why. He had never seen a blue Sharingan. And Sasuke, even looking at his own reflection in the water, he wondered why his Sharingan had turned blue at all. But as he looked at Naruto, he didn't know how, but he could understand it. He didn't know how he did it, but he could understand it. He could see the magic. He could see the magic that Naruto was using. The mystic arts. What couldn't be perceived with normal eyes, he could see it now. When Naruto channeled and used his various spells, Sasuke could read them, understand them. Nothing became hidden to him anymore. The winds of Watum, the vapors of Voltor, the images of Icon, the chains of Kraken, the shield of Seraphim. He could see them all, and he understood how they worked, and he knew how to counter them, even by using his own ninjutsu. At this point, both he and Naruto were now fighting on an even level of power. It seemed as though the battle could go either way. And as the fight continued on, Sasuke would stop and give Naruto his respect. He thanked him. He obtained this new power. He had gotten far stronger than how he would have if he had followed the path his brother had set before him. Maybe he didn't have to kill his best friend, but maybe if he could sever that bond, then he could become truly strong. For Naruto, he wasn't going to let the bond be severed so easily, and Sasuke knew this. The two of them now donning their headbands, they would collide with one another in the final battle. As the two of them danced in a flurry of violence, Naruto and Sasuke pulling out all the stops, Naruto using every spell and trick that he had in his arsenal, Sasuke using every bit of his ninjutsu as well as his tactical genius, on top of his ever-evolving Sharingan. The two of them continued their fight until eventually it came down to what would be their last attack. As Sasuke now morphed once again, his skin becoming a dark gray and his hair growing longer, his eyes shining with the blue Sharingan, as he formed the Onyx Chidori. Naruto, with the power of the Nine Tails swirling around him, he would now have to combine the three great powers. His own power, the power of the Nine Tails, and his mystic power. Together they formed a trifecta of sorts, a threefold cord that could not easily be broken. Naruto would form his Rasengan. It would start out as the Vermilion Rasengan, but then it would change, as the orb was a violet of sorts. It would start to glow and turn into a bright orange, as a magical circle would form around it. This was the pinnacle for Naruto. Mystic style. Nine Tails enhanced Rasengan. With all of their power built up at once, the two of them would charge in the final attack. Sasuke believing if he had given it his all, that he would be able to win. But Naruto edged him out this time around, and Sasuke would be blown back even harder than Naruto was. As the dust settled from their final clash, the one left standing would be Naruto Uzumaki. He would walk towards Sasuke's unconscious body lying in the water, and using his remaining strength, he would pick him up on his shoulders before creating a portal under their feet with the sling ring. He only had enough energy left to use this one technique, and when he did so, they would arrive back in front of the gates of Konoha. Everyone would eventually return back to the Hidden Leaf. Some a lot better than others, but some a bit worse. Thankfully, the combined efforts of Rock Lee and Choji were more than enough to defeat Jirobo. Choji was in a bit of a critical condition. He had to use the Akamichi clan's special food pills, but thankfully he only had to eat the yellow pill. He didn't have to dip into the red one. And Lee, he was a bit exhausted, some chakra exertion, and his muscles were definitely aching, but they were more than capable. Neji had gotten the worst of it in his fight with Kidomaru, and he was in critical condition for some time, as well as Hinata, who was also recovering from her fight with Kimimaru. Haku was alright as well, a few cuts and bruises here and there, a broken bone or so, but she would be fine. Shikamaru only made it out with a broken finger, but he was good. Kiba and Akamaru would need some recovery, but they would make it as well. And as for Naruto and Sasuke, well, they looked as though they had taken each other to hell and back. Even for Naruto's regenerative abilities, he still had a hole in his chest that needed to be healed properly with due time. Sasuke was being kept under a watchful eye in the meanwhile, as everyone else would be taking time to recover. Kakashi was thankful that his students had returned safely, and Sakura was happy to see that Naruto and Sasuke were back home as well. There would be many lectures and a lot of long talking tos, but as Sasuke awoken, in that moment, he felt a bit happy that he had lost. If he had to be honest with himself, he didn't like the person he was becoming, and the fact that Naruto had been the one to defeat him, to bring him back, it was more than what anyone could ask for. His friend had saved him in his time of need. How could he ever face him again? How could he ever look anyone in the eyes after everything he had done? Of course, he wouldn't have too long to answer that question, as Naruto was the first one to barge into his room to pester him some more and make sure he was alright. Of course, Sasuke would just call him a loser and throw a pillow in his face, but he was happy to see that his friend was doing well. And Naruto even wanted to apologize. He understood why Sasuke wanted his revenge. Who wouldn't? His brother was the man that killed his entire family. On some level, you couldn't really fault Sasuke for feeling the way he felt. But at the same time, there was a better way of doing things. And more importantly, he didn't have to do it alone. They would help him if he needed it. And Sasuke would remember those words. At the same time, Sasuke would also learn what happened to his other comrades, and he would go one by one to apologize to all of them for his foolish actions. While some were a bit more hesitant than others, they at the same time could learn to forgive him. But there was one that stood out above the rest. When he learned what happened to Hinata, he went to go see her. She was still recovering, and she was having a bit of a hard time, but she was doing alright. Seeing the scar, the wound that she had received, fighting to save him. He wasn't sure of why, but in that moment, it truly just stuck out to him as all. He doesn't know why he did what he did, but for some reason, Sasuke found himself visiting Hinata more and more, and Hinata was happy to have the company. Throughout this mission and everything else that had occurred, Hinata was coming to grips with another fact of her own. As much as she loved Naruto, and that would never change, she could see Naruto getting closer with Haku, the two of them having their own bond. And it was one that she acknowledged she didn't have with Naruto, and that maybe it would be for the best if she stopped trying to pursue it. She had heard that sometimes opening one's heart to new horizons wasn't a bad thing, and Hinata wondered if she could get there someday. At least these were the type of conversations she had with Sasuke, and Sasuke would remark that it wouldn't be impossible. After all, people could change. You never know. All the while, there were a lot of other changes that were happening as well. Lee would stop and visit Sakura and see how she was doing, and Sakura was grateful that Lee would take the time to visit her. He was always polite, respectful, and sweet. Even Agatha-sensei and Kurenai-sensei remarked that he was a remarkably nice young man, and Sakura would start to take a liking to him. Eventually, though, while Naruto was recovering in the hospital, Jiraiya would stop by to speak to him. He was proud of his student for being able to bring Sasuke back and for succeeding in his mission. But there was also some other news that they needed to discuss. The fact of the matter was that Naruto wasn't safe for now. A group called the Akatsuki, in 2 to 3 years' time, was going to be making their move. And when they did so, Naruto was going to be who they came after, as well as the other Jinchuriki potentially. As if on cue, while the two of them sat in the room together, a portal would open up in front of them, and out of nowhere, Wong would step in. Wong wondered what had happened to Naruto and why he was so beat up, but Naruto, it was Wong, one of his senseis. He had come back. Naruto was so happy to see him, and he even rushed up, despite being wrapped in bandages, to give him a brief hug. But when he looked around, he asked, where was Dr. Strange? Jiraiya, at that moment, was still trying to take all of this in, but there was without a doubt this was one of the guys that had trained Naruto to do the things that he could do, and he was grateful. Wong, however, had some unfortunate news. He would sit Naruto down, and he would tell him about what happened. He would tell him about the events of Avengers Infinity War, and Naruto would learn the fate of Dr. Strange, how he, along with half of all life in their universe, had disappeared. Naruto was devastated to hear this, and Jiraiya could see the pain in his face. A pain that he similarly felt when he lost his sensei, the third Hokage. Wong had come here because he remembered Naruto, and he feared that the phenomenon might have affected other worlds. But surprisingly enough, no one here had actually felt anything happen. So it must have been self-contained, just as Wong thought. While he was there though, he would check in on Naruto to see how his training had gone, and to learn just how much of the power he had mastered. He learned that Naruto had grown in power, and even learned how to control some of the Nine Tails' chakra, and this made him proud. Wong would also reveal that he was now the Sorcerer Supreme, with Strange no longer in existence. While he was there, they took Wong to go and meet with Lady Tsunade, just to keep everyone informed and in the loop at all times. Tsunade was honored to meet with Wong, a teacher of Naruto's, and someone who was very powerful and wise. As they talked and had their discussions, also bringing up that Naruto could still use some more training in other aspects, Tsunade would then come up with an idea. If Wong didn't mind, and he was up for it, would he be willing to take Naruto and Jiraiya with him, at least for 2.5, maybe 3 years most? They needed to be kept on the move, so that the Akatsuki wouldn't be able to find them. And if they could be safe in another world, then that would be all the more beneficial. Wong would warn that that could potentially be dangerous, not knowing how that could affect the multiverse as a whole. But if certain provisions were made, then that could be doable. Of course, that would be up to Naruto and Jiraiya if they would want to take on such a task. And Jiraiya was more than eager. He wanted to learn more about the mystic arts. He wondered if they could potentially be used with ninjutsu, and what that type of training could revolutionize. Once they were able to work things out, they would agree, and Wong would take Jiraiya and Naruto with him for 2.5 years. That way, Naruto could train in a secluded area where the Akatsuki wouldn't be able to find him, and he would be able to improve not only in his ninjutsu, but in the mystic arts as well. As Naruto packed his things to leave once again, he would say goodbye to his friends and comrades. Even Sasuke would want to see him off. As everyone was saying their goodbyes and leaving, Naruto would then finally stop in front of Haku. He would thank her for being beside him when he needed her most, and he promised to get as strong as he could for when he came back, and Haku would hold him to this. However, just before Naruto could hop through the portal to get ready to leave, Haku would pull him back really quick, and she would give him a kiss. As she did so, she wished him good luck, and Naruto was left there dumbfounded. However, he would quickly snap out of this when Zabuza came over near him with the executioner's blade ready to take his head off, and Naruto quickly hopped through the portal to escape, merely dodging the blade going through to his head. Everyone else very much in shock, but not too worried since they felt as though Naruto was going to avoid it. Although when Naruto got through the portal, he looked and saw that some of his hair had been taken off, and he was now extremely worried. In the meantime, Naruto wasn't the only one who was going to train and improve. Haku, she also wanted to take things up a notch with her training. She would approach Lady Tsunade, and she explained that during their last mission, when Hinata was injured, she really couldn't do anything for her. She wasn't sure if she could really be all that useful or not, but she wanted to learn under Lady Tsunade. She didn't want to fall behind Naruto while he was training. She wanted to grow stronger as well. Tsunade would think this over for a bit, and she decided that Haku could be the kind of student she was looking for. A student with a Kekkei Genkai for ice release, something that no one else in this world had at the moment, as well as having the aptitude for water release. Then there were a lot of possibilities. After all, she was the granddaughter of the first Hokage, and she did have the scrolls of the first Hokage's brother, Tobirama Senju, who was world-renowned for his water-style techniques. If there was anyone who could have that passed down to, then it would definitely be someone like Haku. And with that, her training would begin. In the meanwhile, Sakura would decide to take her training to the next level as well, deciding it was time to get a true hold over this chaos magic, and to see what she was really capable of. As Agatha watched her train, she couldn't help but feel as though she were coming into her own, and she felt as though she were watching Wanda all over again. Everyone else would continue on in their own training to get stronger also. Sasuke, now back in the village, knew that he needed to take things to the next level, but how, he wasn't entirely sure. Although he had talked to one person about who he wanted to train with, and that was Hinata. He wasn't sure what would happen, but he wanted to train with someone with the Byakugan. And not just Hinata as well, but Neji also wanted to test himself against a user of the Sharingan. And the three decided that they would work together in the meantime, to bring out what their dojutsu could really do, the Byakugan and the Sharingan. And Sasuke was looking forward to this prospect. However, one late afternoon, as the sun was starting to set, and Sasuke was walking home, as he found himself on an empty road, he would stop as he looked behind, as he felt a presence that was following him. There he saw a man. He seemed as though he were dressed in a suit, tan color of sorts, short, dark hair. The man looked at him and smiled as he walked closer, Sasuke standing on guard as he had never seen this man before a day in his life. On his coat, there were 3 letters, TVA. And And just who the hell are you? Ah, my dear boy. That is the question. I go by many things, but you can call me Loki. And what exactly do you want with me, Loki? It's not really what I want with you, but actually it's what I want with your friend, but he appears to be gone at the moment. A boy by the name of Naruto Uzumaki? And what exactly do you want with Naruto? Oh, nothing in particular. It's just... You see, I'm in a bit of a situation. I've been tasked with finding some strong and capable warriors to aid me in my conquest, as I am on a mission, you see. A mission to save all worlds. All worlds? Ah, yes, my dear boy. You see, this might be a bit much for you to take in, but there is more to this world than just the ones that you and your friend Naruto know. Multiple realities, dimensions, all that good stuff. The world is quite bigger than you know, Sasuke Uchiha, but you just don't know it yet. We're dealing with forces far beyond anything you could even comprehend. And if I can't get a team strong enough to come together when I need them most, then there's no telling what can be lost. And what exactly does this have to do with me? Oh, this has everything to do with you, my friend. You see, I see great potential in you. You remind me a lot of myself. And I want to help you reach that potential. I think that if you and I work together, you can be just what this world needs. A hero. And I should just believe you. You don't have to. But I know if you really want to understand that power of yours, those eyes, you're going to need my help. Sasuke looked at him skeptically, wondering if he knew about his blue Sharingan. What exactly do you know? Well, Sasuke, I know a lot. But let me ask you this. Tell me what you know about magic. This concludes What If Naruto Was Trained by Dr. Strange? Naruto Mystic Adventures, Part 8. As always, if you enjoyed today's video, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is Power Core Productions and Podcastings that's to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video as we are going to be continuing What If Deku Was the Son of Rock Lee? My Hero Academia Fighting Spirit, Part 8. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I am Javon Harrington with Power Core Productions and Podcastings. Signing off, and I'll see you next time.